Hey, hey, I think the chipmunk mic decided to make a return. I don't know what just I don't know what that was. Oh man, this is the oh man, what a tremendous start. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the All In Show here on the Clemson Voice of College Football YouTube channel. I'm your host, Jordan Bowman. Sorry about that that little intro. It's what's funny because usually when right before we start the show and like we're in the backstage and all that, like we always test our audio, and sometimes TPC comes in. He's had this problem for a while where he just comes in and his audio sounds like a chipmunk for some reason. So usually we get that straightened out before. But I think like right when I started the stream, like he exited out and then jumped back in. So and usually that fixes it. But I think it was fine when we started the stream, and then when he jumped out and refreshed and came back in, it came back. So that was that was pretty funny. But yeah, no, it wasn't just your phone or laptop or whatever you're watching this on. That was real. So we're gonna we're gonna cut that. But all seriousness, thank you guys once again for joining us for another episode. Obviously, new start time, so this has kind of been a transition for all of us. This is going to be the start time moving forward, unless we make an announcement otherwise. So 5:30 on Friday, at 5:30 Eastern time on Fridays every single week, and that'll be our schedule moving forward. But I think we got TPC back. Let's see how he's sounding this go around. What's going on, my man? You're muted.
Are we good to go now?
Yeah, you sound great.
All right. Back in business. Feels like forever since I've been in the studio, man. So I think any and all technical difficulties just, converged all at once tonight. I couldn't get logged on to StreamYard, finally get logged on to StreamYard. Mic's not working, camera's not working, get kicked out a few times. So here we are, hashtag professionals, keeping everything as real as we can with you guys. But like Jordan was saying, man, it's good to be back. This is the new time slot, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here for the All In Show on the Clemson football at the Voice of College Football. Again, thank you guys so much for joining us. A little bit late starting tonight. I was trying to explain, amidst all my technical difficulties, that I was having all those technical difficulties, but you guys couldn't hear me, so it didn't matter anyway. As you guys can see, we've had a ton of technical difficulties tonight, but hey, man, it's all good. We take it in stride. We keep it real around here. Appreciate all you guys showing up and showing out tonight. Get into the comment section. Let us know what you guys want to talk about tonight. Let us know what is on your mind, and we will get to that a little bit later in the show. We got a great show scheduled for you guys tonight. We're going to talk a little bit of recruiting, going to talk a little Cade Klubnik. And then, as always, at the end of the show, once we're done with our planned portion, we will turn it over to the comment section. We'll let you guys kind of drive the show, ask your questions, and get your comments in and your thoughts about Clemson football as well. So, Jordan, aside from all the technical difficulties today, welcome to the new time slot. We are on a new day, a new time slot. Hopefully it works out a little bit better than it did today. I think the timing will be better for both me and you.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to make this change because, the schedules during the summer have just, we both have things going on. And so it was best to kind of move it. But we didn't want to, stop doing the show or anything like that, because we enjoy doing this too much. And we enjoy interacting with all of y'all too much. So I think this is a time that works for all of us at this point. And so excited to kind of move forward, because other than that, the show's going to be exactly the same. And I want to give, the best quality content that we can. So hopefully next time we have a better start. That was
We'll
pretty
see.
comical, but that was pretty on brand for us. So
Hey,
that
that's
was,
good. Hey, we keep it 100% real around here. Okay,
yeah,
there
we
ain't
do.
no hiding. We keep it 100% how it is. Speaking of the channel and all the changes and everything going on in the new time slot, we are at exactly 4,994 subscribers, Jordan. So literally 6 subscribers away. We were 7, I think, earlier today, but 6 subscribers away from that 5,000 subscriber mark. So if you guys could help us out with that, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, remember that the Voice of College Football brand has a ton of different channels out there. There's the Michigan channel, the Ohio State channel, there's the Georgia channel. There's all sorts of channels out there that I think you guys would probably find interesting at different points in time for various reasons. So check out the rest of the channels out there. Show them some love, show them some support. As always, there's descriptions in the description part of this video, an Amazon link that you can use each time you shop on Amazon. Just copy and paste that, and it will help support what we do here at the Voice of College Football. And then, as always, we have the super chat feature available for you guys. If you want to guarantee that your comment gets read and reacted to live on the show, go ahead and hit that super chat. You'll be supporting what me and Jordan do here, and then you'll also ensure that your comment gets read on the show, because unfortunately we just can't get to all of them. But make sure you guys are hitting that like button. Make sure you guys are hitting that subscribe button. It's been a crazy week, and I think the best thing for us to do is just dive into the show now, man. Let's get it started.
Yeah, let's do it. Quick shout out to the comment section. Jackson Johnson, our lead promoter, really of all the Voice of College Football YouTube network. Thank you for what you do. Also one of our moderators. So glad to see you. Droid's here. Nobody in particular. We got a lot of our regulars here. John, our resident moderator. Jay, another one of our regulars. Isaac. Let me see. Don't want to miss anybody. Moose, my guy. One of our faithful Michigan fans.
That's right. That's right.
Across the Voice of College Football YouTube network. Great dude. Happy to see you, man. And I think I covered everybody that's left a comment so far. So without further ado, let's kind of dive in. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, particularly in the recruiting landscape. Some positive, some negative. We'll talk about it. But where do you want to start?
Yeah, Jordan, I thought we'd go ahead and start with kind of just a quick update for kind of the big name players that Clemson's tracking on the recruiting trail right now. I know Clemson fans out there got a ton of questions. And, some of us have concerns about, the lack of momentum out of the big recruiting weekend that we had seen in the previous 2 iterations of this big June recruiting weekend that Clemson has been doing for a couple years now. Now comes this 3rd iteration of it. We're not quite seeing the same momentum that we saw out of the previous 2 years. And there's probably a couple reasons for that. There's just some guys that are not willing to shut it down right now. They want to keep their options open. They want to go through all of their official visits. And that's kind of what's happening right now. But as you guys all know, the dead period for recruiting is quickly approaching, right? So after this weekend, the NCAA will be in a dead period from June 24th to July 24th. So a 30-day, month-long dead period will happen after this weekend. So it's going to be a big weekend, not for Clemson recruits coming to Clemson, but them going to other universities on official visits. And some of the big names out there is obviously David Sanders Jr., first and foremost, the big 5-star offensive tackle recruit for the Clemson Tigers. He visits Ohio State this weekend. Bryce Davis, unfortunately, is visiting South Carolina this weekend. I don't know why he's doing that. Everybody knows he's not going to South Carolina, but whatever. Go ahead and go on unofficial to South Carolina. We'll forgive you for it. Safety Jordan Young is going to Michigan. He was also at NC State the middle of this week. Cortez Mills, big 4-star wide receiver that Clemson is hopefully going to land. He canceled his Miami official visit and decided that he will use that official visit for LSU. So he's heading down to LSU this weekend to go see what they got going on, and they're probably going to make a pretty big push for him, I would assume. Gregory Xavier Thomas is taking an official to Florida State. Mario Nash Jr. going to Mississippi State. Hardy Watts going to Michigan. That's a big one to watch. Michigan's going to make a huge push for Hardy Watts. They're probably, honestly, the leader at this point, and it could spell trouble for them, for at least for Clemson, heading out of this weekend if you're hoping for Clemson to land Hardy Watts, 4-star interior offensive lineman. Another big one headed to Michigan. Michigan is going to be our arch enemy this weekend. You guys, Moose, go ahead and cover your ears in the comment section. I know you're in here, but we got to hope for you saw all those technical difficulties that happened to us at the beginning of the show. That's how we got to hope the Michigan official visit weekend goes this weekend.
Yeah.
It's a comedy of errors. And they got a whole bunch of issues just like we just had because
I hope they spell Hardy Watts' name wrong.
Yeah, I hope they spell the name wrong. I hope they get his mom's name wrong. You know, they get his mom's name wrong. You know, they just mess it all up, right? Hand out the wrong programs, you know, all of that stuff. But Hardy Watts heading up to Michigan, I should say. Kamar Archie heading up to Michigan as well. That's another big one. Rutgers is in the mix for him as well. So probably more so than Michigan. Rutgers is in the mix, believe it or not. Both northern guys, both guys that are familiar with the area up there. So look for that to be a obstacle, at least for Clemson to overcome. Not that they can't, but it's just something to note. Max Buchanan headed to Penn State. And then Shamari Reed headed to Penn State as well. So that's kind of, Jordan, the list, pretty long list of some key guys in this recruiting class coming up that are heading to the opposition, right? I mentioned all the three guys headed to Michigan. So what are your kind of thoughts on this last official visit weekend prior to the dead period? What do some of these kind of spell for Clemson? I know some of these guys are, you know, Clemson may be somewhat leading for some of them. They may not be leading for other. So what are your kind of thoughts on all these guys? And do you see any trouble coming out of this weekend for the Clemson Tigers and some of these recruits?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, so, you know, there's a lot to kind of dive in here. And there's a lot of different things to watch with a number of the guys that you listed. Obviously, everybody, you know, any Clemson fan listening, they've been wanting to know, you know, what's going on with David Sanders, what's you know, the kind of the lowdown there. This visit this weekend to Ohio State is very big, and I think we're going to learn a lot about where things sit coming out. You know, obviously he was at Tennessee this past weekend, another major player. You know, some may say he's the leader currently for David Sanders. And Ohio State is right there and then making a massive push as well. And they have they've been pretty persuasive on the recruiting trail this cycle for a number of reasons. So this visit could be very instructive to how that recruitment is sort of shaping out as we get closer to the finish line. You know, Bryce Davis, you mentioned heading to South Carolina. I don't. You know, Beamer, to Beamer's credit, you know, he does do a good job on official visits, and he does make, you know, the guys feel wanted. And he does. I mean, they do put on put together a good presentation, you know, as far as when they host guys. But this has been a Clemson-Georgia battle. It's still, I expect it to still be a Clemson-Georgia battle. And I think Georgia has the edge right now. I think there are a lot of things that Bryce likes about Clemson. And I think there are a lot of things pulling him in Clemson's direction. But, you know, I think, you know, kind of the people around him, there are a lot of things, kind of a lot of different factors that are kind of factoring into, you know, where he may end up. And right now I feel like Georgia's in the best position. You mentioned safety Jordan Young, 4-star out of Monroe. You know, heading to Michigan, I think it's a big visit. I think they could potentially make some noise. But I still like where Clemson sits a ton. He was at NC State during the midweek as well, as you mentioned. I still think Clemson is in the driver's seat right now. They just kind of have to weather the storm, let him go through the process, and I think I'd lean towards him being in the class at the end of the day more than I don't. But we'll see. Michigan has definitely done some big things on their official visit weekends. So who knows? Maybe they make things interesting. You mentioned 4-star wide receiver Cortez Mills. That I think I think right now it's an Oklahoma-Clemson battle. I think that's kind of what's been framed. He was at Oklahoma this past weekend, and they made a tremendous impression. So I think it's going to come down to those two schools. This LSU visit, we'll see. But I still think Clemson and Oklahoma are the two right now. He's set to make a decision. I believe July. I think July 4th. I don't quote me on that. I know it's in July. Zay Thomas heading to Florida State this weekend. Clemson likes him a lot as an oversign at corner. So I don't really expect him to end up in the class. I'm sure you've seen a lot of crystal balls in favor of Florida State. I think that's where he ends up. His dad is a huge FSU guy. He's right down the road. Like it's pretty much a layup, I would say, for Florida State. He's set to announce his commitment at the end of the month. I think Florida State is in the driver's seat there. Anquan Fegans, not really tracking him at this point. I don't that hasn't been a relationship that has really gone much of anywhere since the official visit weekend. I don't expect him to end up in the class. 4-star interior offensive lineman Mario Nash. I think he's an interesting one. His timeline is a lot slower than a lot of the other guys on this list. I don't really expect him to make a decision until the season, probably into the season. But I think he's a guy that Clemson could circle back around on if some of their other targets go elsewhere. And I do like his tape a lot. Matt Luke has a lot of ties to the state of Mississippi, which is where he's from. And so I do think, he's one to watch moving forward, and we'll kind of see how, things shake up, and he might be one that Clemson circles back around to. You mentioned Hardy Watts heading to Michigan. I think Michigan is in the driver's seat, and I think they are pretty definitively in the driver's seat at this point.
Yeah,
would not be surprised if he left Michigan as a Michigan commit.
He probably commits this weekend to Michigan before he leaves campus, I would assume.
Yeah. You mentioned linebacker Kamar Archie. This one has been a really interesting one to track because his recruitment hasn't been like. I think just because having Rutgers in the conversation is always going to raise some eyebrows. Obviously, he's from New Jersey, so it makes sense to a degree. But when you look at the schools he's interested in, Rutgers, Michigan, and Clemson, there's a wide range there. But Rutgers really wants him to stay in state. They are pushing hard to keep him in state, and he does have a lot of ties and close connections there. So I don't want to say that Rutgers is the leader right now because I still think that's still kind of shaping out, but they are a major player in this recruitment. But I think Clemson is as well. So
and Clemson,
I think it's still tight right now.
Clemson made a big push for him, right? I mean, he was the sole linebacker at the big official visit weekend. They obviously did that on purpose to make sure that he understood how much of a priority he was for them in this class and how much they wanted him to commit to the Tigers. So I think there's something to be said about that. He was interviewed about that after he left Clemson, and that definitely made an impact on him being the only linebacker at the official visit weekend. But again, those kind of hometown ties, if you will, those are always uphill battles. I mean, not that Clemson won't win it, but it certainly makes it difficult. And and definitely makes it hard to predict.
3-star interior offensive lineman Max Buchanan heading to Penn State. I think this is a 3-team race between Florida State, Penn State, and Clemson. So this will be an instructive visit for how his recruitment is shaping out. I think Florida State has the lead right now. I would say, but we'll see kind of how things shake out as we reach the finish line. And then 3-star wide receiver Samari Reed. He's been a interesting one to track as well, because there just hasn't been a ton come out about him. He's kept his recruitment really, really low key. It's kind of strange. I say 3-star, but I think he's a 4-star on some other sites. He's kind of on that borderline. But Clemson does really like him, and would like to have him in the class, especially if they can't land Cortez Mills. So we'll kind of see how this Penn State visit goes. He's a guy that has been flying under the radar this entire time, and so it's been kind of hard to get a read on his recruitment to a degree. So we'll kind of see what happens there. But that kind of covers the major targets and kind of where Clemson sits with a lot of them. Some positive news and obviously some not so positive news.
Absolutely.
But again, recruiting is a very fluid game. We're still in June, and we'll kind of see what happens, because surprises happen all the time. And we think about the guys that we think we have, and then they end up going elsewhere. But vice versa has happened a ton as well. So we'll kind of see what happens there.
Right. Absolutely. Look, a lot of time left on the clock, a lot of, back and forth with these recruits. The coaching staff will continue to engage, but this will definitely be a huge weekend for a lot of big time recruits that Clemson's tracking right now. I think we'll have maybe some clearer pictures after this weekend about where we need to go as it pertains to this class, because I think there's a possibility that some things get shifted possibly in our way, and then maybe in a couple other situations a different way, where we know we have to pivot and kind of adjust fire and go towards a different direction when it comes to some of these position groups and these guys that are probably going to commit this weekend. So we'll see how it all shakes out. It's going to be exciting to watch. Again, no disrespect, Moose, but I hope you guys have the worst official visit weekend of all time in Michigan history. I know you don't want to hear that, but it's for selfish reasons. I just, I got to root for that. So
it's nothing personal.
Nothing personal. We'll be friends again next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, shout out to Moose for being a supporter of the channel and the show. But yeah, that kind of wraps up kind of the big name of Clemson recruits and targets out there and what they will be doing this weekend. So, stay abreast on the internet. I'm sure there'll be tons coming out on Twitter about these various official visits, and there'll be information coming out and rumors and all sorts of stuff. So get as spun up in it as you want, or stay away from it and wait till some credible news comes out about it. Whatever you prefer. But moving right along with the same theme of this recruiting class and recent commits. As everybody knows, last weekend.
Not this recruiting class, but
the last recruiting class, the next recruiting class.
The next recruiting class.
The next recruiting class. Thank you. Brady Hart leaves Clemson's camp with an offer, along with
Tait Reynolds.
Tait Reynolds. Thank you. We talked about that last week, about how both of them left camp with an offer. Tait Reynolds got the first offer. Brady Hart got the second offer. Brady announces first, then Tait Reynolds announces, and it's kind of a two-way race, right? Clemson is basically it's going to be like we outlined last week, first come first serve type basis. Well, Brady Hart goes up north, visits Ohio State, visits Michigan, commits to Michigan essentially on the spot. So, what were your thoughts on Brady Hart committing to Michigan? Was that a surprise that happened during that visit? And does that, speak to how Garrett Riley and the staff maybe feels about Tait Reynolds, and maybe they were gravitating towards him, or was Brady Hart just convinced when he went to Michigan, and maybe Clemson didn't do as good of a job when he was there, or he didn't feel quite the love from the coaching staff. What do you think happened there?
Yeah, I mean, I think really what it comes down to is Clemson clearly, they offered two guys, told them both, hey, listen, we're only taking one of you. So whoever wants to jump into the boat now, you get the spot. And obviously Brady still wanted to go through the process for sure. And Tait Reynolds too is still taking visits elsewhere and all that. But Brady wanted to go through the process. He didn't want to jump into a rash decision, and Clemson didn't push for any of them to make a decision.
Right.
And so I think he takes his visit to Ohio State. He leaves with an offer. He already had a Michigan offer, and he goes on that visit to Michigan. And sometimes you get on campus. When we talk about it with the guys that commit to Clemson, but it happens. Obviously, it happens elsewhere too,
right,
where a guy just gets on campus, they feel the love, and they, things just click. And so Brady Hart was.
You just know, right? Like, I mean, you pop on campus and you're like, "Yep, this is it."
And what I have picked up about Brady is like he was a guy that was like, I don't intend to go through this process a second time. I don't want to. Be a guy that commits, then decommits and flips and all of that. He said, once I commit, this is where I plan on being. And I want to get, I want to go through my process, evaluate my options. And when I find the right fit, I'm locking it in. And so that's what he decided to do. And all power to him, and really, really love his tape. So I do think, as I talked about last week, what a guy I would have loved to have in Clemson's 2026 class. But I do think it is instructive to kind of how Clemson views Tait Reynolds. I think the fact that he was offered, Tait Reynolds was the first offer, was very telling. And I do think that Garrett Riley really, really was gravitated to Tait Reynolds because of his size. Really, really, like he just, he looks like what he had in Max Duggan at TCU. I think his recruiting profile lists him at like 6'2", 195. He is not 6'2", 195. He is like, I think at camp he was measured at 6'3", 6'4", 215. Like wow. He is not a little guy. Yeah. And when you see pictures and video of him throwing, you're like, okay, I see I see the vision now. Like, who's this 3-star baseball player from Arizona State, or that's committed to Arizona State? And then you see him throw the football, and you're like, and you see like his built, body, and you're like, oh, okay, well, there he is. And so I do think that, Garrett Riley was really impressed with him at camp. They felt he performed the best of all the quarterbacks that were at the Dabo Swinney camp. And I think he's the guy. As far as the 2026 cycle is concerned, Clemson has found who they're looking for. Now, we'll see what happens if, Tait Reynolds, goes on these visits and maybe he gravitates towards somewhere else and Clemson has to pivot. But, with Brady Hart committing, I think it's Clemson is all in on Tait Reynolds. So we'll see what happens as we get closer to August, and when he can, evaluate what his baseball prospects are and kind of, where he stands there from a Clemson perspective, and also, from a professional standpoint, because he is I believe he is a top 50 baseball prospect. So, it's always kind of right on that borderline of guys that, maybe they stay in school and play baseball, or maybe they go straight to the draft. So it can kind of be that it can kind of be that tipping point, but it's a risk for sure. But it's one that Clemson is very willing to take, and they seem to be, pretty all in on what his potential can be. And like I said, it's a gamble, but Clemson clearly feels like they found something here. So
yeah, I mean, look, they've done their evaluation. They feel like he's the right guy for the class, right? Especially with Brady Hart going to Michigan and committing there. It's really down to Tait Reynolds, and that's the guy that it seems that Garrett Riley wants. I think we expressed our concerns last week about the baseball stuff, not really about him as a quarterback, but just as splitting time with baseball. He made it clear that he definitely at least wants to play his freshman year of baseball at a minimum. So obviously the Clemson baseball program is going to be in the mix on recruiting Tait Reynolds and him identifying if he's got a shot to, have a spot on that baseball team. And that can't happen until August. So we'll kind of see how that goes. That'll be interesting. That'll definitely play a lot into it. But again, I don't necessarily like the idea of my quarterback splitting time with another sport just because of the position of quarterback and all that goes into it, and the responsibilities and just the mental part of the game that you have to dedicate and really dive into, not just during the season, but in the off season when you're trying to work on your mechanics and get better and all that kind of stuff. So that part worries me. But again, you got to like what you see physically with the guy. He's a big guy. He's got a big arm. He's athletic, so you got to like that part of it. No doubt about it. And we'll see what happens with all the baseball stuff. Moose has got a correction for us. He said Brady Hart committed to Michigan while on the visit to OSU.
I think he's right. I kind of missed the timeline on that. I knew he was at Ohio State, at some point last week, and he had an offer, like he announced an offer, and then, then
that's rough, bro. That's rough. You got somebody on an official visit, and they commit on your official visit to your rival. That's tough.
That's pretty. It kind of reminds me of when it's not exactly the same.
Yeah.
But it kind of reminds me of Zach Thomas last year when he committed. Well, because if you remember, he commits to Clemson on his after his official visit.
Yeah.
Then he decommits.
Right.
Because his family wanted him to take a visit to Florida State.
Yeah.
And in the parking lot, like after his visit, he calls Clemson back up and is like, this was a mistake.
My bad.
Yeah. Please let me back in the class.
Can I commit again?
Yeah. It's kind of what, and then he ends up back in Clemson's class. So I thought that's kind of funny. And that's what I do love is that between Clemson and Michigan fans, we certainly have some history, not nearly as much as Michigan, but we certainly do have some history with Ohio State. So any kind of shortcomings, we can kind of revel in a little bit. So
100%.
That is pretty brutal.
I'll jump on the OSU hate train with Michigan any day. I'm all aboard. I hate Ohio State. Can't stand them. What a terrible program. Moose said he got a call from J.J. McCarthy at the OSU and committed immediately. Soft mentality at OSU. So, yeah, all stuff we've heard about OSU before. So, shout out to Michigan and getting their 2026 guy, their signal caller, committed early. We'll see if we can wrap up Tait Reynolds and have our guy pretty early on as well. We'll see how that works out.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's going to kind of conclude the recruiting talk. I started some questions. We'll probably circle back around when we get to the listener section. But before we get there, let's talk about one of our players that are actually on the roster right now. And that's none other than our starting signal caller in the for the 2024 season, Cade Klubnik. He was at the Elite 11 this past weekend as a college counselor. I did want to talk about this a little bit because actually I was listening to Josh Pate. He does the Late Kick show over for 24/7 Sports, but he also does a Late Kick extra podcast that's podcast only, so it doesn't show up on their YouTube channel or anything like that. Where it's basically just a mailbag episode, and he had mentioned he was answering a question about Clemson and what the conversation would be about them if they won the national championship this year. And he talked about how he was at the Elite 11 finals and watched Cade Klubnik throw, and he looked really, really, really good. So I did want to talk about this because there does seem to be a disconnect as far as kind of, and I think just within the fan base about how good Cade actually is. There's some in how talented he actually is, because I feel like I think when people get into their criticisms of Cade and what he struggled with last year, I think they take it to the point where they kind of discredit his actual physical talent and ability.
Yes, yeah.
And which obviously is not the case. And I saw somebody say that Cade is a extremely inaccurate quarterback, and I was like, well, no, that's not true. They kind of just find any sort of criticism, any sort of thing that they've heard before about any given quarterback, and they just kind of attribute it to Cade. It's like, oh man, he's inaccurate. He has a weak arm, or he can't do this, can't do that. Footwork, and some of it's true, but some of it's like they're just looking for things to say about why Cade is or isn't good. So I did want to talk about this because I do think there is some kind of disconnect within the fan base about what Cade is and what he was last year, what he is currently, and what he can be this year. I think those are three different conversations.
I think. Look,
it's kind of been blended into one. It's almost like guys can't improve and players can't get better.
Absolutely, which is why I think me and you have made not a huge deal, but we have made clear that it is exciting to see him putting work in this offseason, right? He's out working with Jordan Palmer. He's got Antonio Williams out there with them. He's got Jake Brenningstool, two of his what you would assume to be his main weapons this upcoming season, right? So he's working there. He's a counselor at the Elite 11 camp. He's working with younger guys there. He's there throwing. And I think one of the things to remember with Cade is, yes, is it true, or is some of the criticism that he has received since being a quarterback at Clemson fair? Absolutely. His decision making has left some to be desired, right? Needs improvement for sure. He needs to be able to move through progressions quicker, make quicker decisions, read defenses a little bit quicker at the line of scrimmage, right? Pre-snap, not lock in on one guy. But arm talent, Cade Klubnik's got arm talent. Athleticism, Cade Klubnik's got athleticism. Accuracy, Cade Klubnik's got accuracy, right? I would encourage people to remember who Cade Klubnik was when he was recruited, right? This is a guy that performed massively at the highest levels of Texas football. This guy wasn't playing in some podunk town in the middle of nowhere in small town USA, right? This dude was playing major high school football in Texas, where it's like almost a religion down there, right? And he was playing for a well-known school like Westlake, right? And led them to multiple championships. And you saw his athleticism, you saw his decision-making, you saw his ability to rise to the occasion in the biggest moments. Now, that hasn't necessarily translated to the college game yet, but you got to understand that it's there. his ability is still there. He's got to put it all together, right? Let's remember that this is going to now be year 2 of the Garrett Riley system, right? We finally went through an offseason where we had adequate scholarship wide receivers available for him to work with throughout spring and throughout the summer. They're obviously out places. They're throwing together. They're having set sessions together. They're building that chemistry. So just remember that Cade Klubnik has the ability to turn it around, right? It would not surprise me for Cade Klubnik to come out this season and look like a different quarterback. I'm not saying he's going to go out there and throw for, 4,500, 5,000 yards. I'm not saying that at all. But Cade Klubnik has the ability to do that. He does with the proper help around him. And if his decision making gets better and all of that stuff, and I know that's a lot of ifs, but to say that he doesn't have the talent to turn this around or the ability is just, it's not true.
Yeah.
He hasn't done it to this point, but that doesn't mean he can't do it, right? There's a lot of growth that needs to happen there, and I think that Cade Klubnik would be the first to tell you that he's got a lot of growing to do. But I think he's also a guy that takes personal accountability and personal responsibility for his play on the field. And he understands that last season it wasn't good enough. I think he'd be the first to tell you it wasn't good enough. And I'd be willing to bet that he would tell you he's not satisfied with it, right? Which is why he's out there working and trying to get better. So I think he's a much better quarterback than people realize. We just got to see it on the field. It's got to come all together, and I think it's going to help because of all the things I listed, right? Year 2 under Garrett Riley. Garrett Riley's becoming, a little bit more comfortable with the personnel that he has. The wide receiver room, we've gone over it a couple times this offseason, Jordan. I know a lot of people don't know none of the names, but there's a ton of talent, and it's deep in that wide receiver room, right? We got Matt Luke as the new offensive line coach, right? I know a lot of people don't know this too, but there's a ton of talent along that offensive line as well, right? And now you have a coach there that can absolutely develop them into what their star rating said they were when they committed to Clemson, right? So there's a lot of pieces, I think, coming together. We just got to, hope that it can all come together this season. But Cade Klubnik is absolutely a guy that is more than talented enough to be a really, really good quarterback for the Clemson Tigers.
Yeah, and you basically hit on it. I mean, it's always been. I think it's always been up here for Cade, and that's what it was last year. I think a lot. I mean, I think at times, especially when you talk about what happened when DJ was the quarterback. I mean, there was a lot of mental issues too that he had to work through. But also, we had to talk about how mechanics were kind of off, and he had to change those. He would sail a lot of throws. Like Cade didn't really do that a ton. Actually, some of Cade's best throws last year weren't caught, and that was kind of the frustrating thing at times. I do think the drop issues that we've seen with the receivers has gotten, was better last season, but it was still a problem at times. And I think some of his best throws last year weren't caught. I think about that throw, really the first game of the year against Duke, where he's throwing on the run. I wish I could pull up the clip right now. But he's throwing on the run. I think it's like a drag or something. I don't remember what receiver he was throwing to, but he threw off one leg. It was kind of a sidearm throw, and it was a perfectly placed ball that just hit off the receiver's chest. It was stuff like that, and it was a cross hash throw too, like an extremely difficult throw. And I think when people talk about arm talent, they always they mistakenly think of arm strength. Now, I think that's a part of arm talent for sure. Like being able to throw the ball really far is part of your arm talent. But when quarterback coaches and evaluators of the quarterback position talk about arm talent, it's about being able, how well can you layer your throws? How well can you how much touch can you put on it?
Right.
how much, the spin rate, there's all sorts of stuff that you can get into with, what actually makes a talented quarterback talented. And it's not just arm strength. And so I think when people talk about Cade and it's like he doesn't have like the elite arm strength that DJ had, they'll say it's like, oh, he has a weak arm. And that's not true.
No.
He's gotten I would say he has an above average arm. He can make pretty much any throw that's within reason, like that you need him to make. Like he can make any throw, especially within Garrett Riley's system. Like he can make those throws. The problem with him last year was he just has to he has to do a better job of giving them a chance. Sometimes it was, he tried to put too much, arc on it at times. Sometimes it wasn't, he didn't put enough. It's about finding that, that internal like kind of feel when you're making those throws down the field. So it's never. I don't think it's an arm strength issue for Cade. It's not an arm talent issue for Cade. Like I said, it's all been up here. I think it's up here from going through progressions. The timing at times was just not where it needed to be. Throws were a little bit late, and it was the difference between a catch and an incompletion or an interception at times. So that just. I wanted to discuss this because you ask any one Clemson fan like what they feel about Cade Klubnik, like how good is Cade Klubnik, and you might get like 5 different answers. And they all say something different. So I wanted to kind of discuss that for a little bit, and just the Elite 11 stuff was just kind of reminded me of how good he actually is, and from a talent standpoint. I mean, he was the Elite 11 MVP. Now, that doesn't mean everything. There have been some Elite 11 MVPs that didn't pan out, but
100% there has. But physically,
the story hasn't been written on Cade. And I do.
Cade's story at Clemson is far from over. Physically, it's all there. Physically, Cade Klubnik is the guy you need him to be. And you're right, Jordan. To your point, it's the mental stuff. It's the reads. It's the the check calls at the line. It's the making those split second quick decisions. It's looking how those safeties are lined up and what's going to be open and what route's going to be best for that particular play and that particular coverage, right? And the alignment that you're in, right? That is the stuff that Cade has to improve on this offseason. The physical stuff, man, it's there. It always has been there. He is physically gifted as a quarterback. And I know some people probably out there is like, I don't believe that, but he is. He just is. He's athletic. He can make plays on the run. He's got, like you say, an above average arm. He can make all the throws necessary that he would be asked to do as a Clemson quarterback, right? So there's no worries there. That he can't make a throw that they need him to make. He can make all the throws, right? He's just got to be more confident in what he's seeing, more confident in the offense, and more confident in the guys around him. And I don't think people realize how much of continuity and chemistry go into an offense, especially an offense like Garrett Riley, where there's so many motions and they're moving and they're, he's really scheming guys open and there's some option routes and things like that happen. And without chemistry, that stuff becomes really difficult to do. And I think there'll be a lot more chemistry. There'll be a lot more cohesion just as an overall offense this year. With Matt Luke taking over the offensive line, I think those guys are only going to get better. I'm not saying they're going from where they were last year to, top 5 offensive line in college football. I'm not saying that at all, but I think they will get significantly better, right? I think they will act as a more cohesive offensive line, and I don't think we'll see quite the musical chairs, which will help Cade out, right? He'll be more comfortable with his protection because it's going to be the same game in and game out, right? Whereas last year, you got to kind of worry here and there, and believe it or not, that's in a quarterback's mind, How many times did Cade Klubnik get sacked last year? Like, what was it, like 28?
28.
28 times? I mean, that's in a quarterback's mind. It always speeds him up. So now he's not going through his progressions like he should. He's just locking on one guy, and you kind of get some of the results that you got last year. Not that he doesn't shoulder some of that blame, but some of that also goes on the offensive line, right? Some of that goes on the wide receiver and the in and out, the injuries that were there last year, and some of the drop balls, some of the poor route running that was there last year, some of the giving up on routes that we saw at times last year. And then same with Cade. There were wide receivers running wide open that he was just not seeing, right? So there's a lot of reasons that Clemson's offense looked the way it did last year, I think. It wasn't all Cade. It was a lot on Cade. But to your point, Jordan, the physical aspects of Cade's game are there. They're 100% there. You're right. The story's not written on Cade. There's plenty more to come. And, as Clemson fans, you got to believe that he's going to turn it around. And by the time that, it's a curtain call for his career at Clemson, that it's going to look, the narrative and the story behind Cade Klubnik is going to be that he persevered. He kept working. He kept his head down. He turned it around. And he became a pretty good quarterback for the Tigers, right? That's what you got to hope if you're a Clemson fan, right? Because you've seen what's behind him. We need Cade Klubnik to step up and be that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a friend of mine. He might be listening. He put it this way, and I thought it was pretty funny. We were talking about the spring game and kind of the difference between what we saw from Cade and what we saw from Trent Pierman, and he was like, Trent looks like he knows where he's going with the football before it's even snapped. And so it was like if we put Trent Pierman's brain in Cade's body, we go 12-0. I thought that was kind of funny because I do think it's like I do think the difference when you watch them, I think that was kind of the separate, because Trent Pierman does not have nearly the arm talent that Cade does. He just doesn't. He's not a very physically gifted thrower of the football, but it seemed like his understanding of the offense and what he was looking at this, pre-snap. I think that's kind of the biggest thing. And that's a lot of what, Garrett Riley's system is. I mean, a lot of it is creating matchups, before the ball is even snapped. And it's like you want Cade to get to the point where he's like, he gets a look and he's like, oh, this is going to be a touchdown. I know where.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
You have, I don't even know an example, but like he looks at whatever he's looking at and he immediately sees, he knows where he's going with the football. And he's like, okay, if this isn't there, then this, and it's a very quick process. Like when quarterbacks, like, it's not even like they sit there and look at the defense and, run down the play clock. Like, the best quarterbacks are able to, get a look and just immediately they kind of have that plan in place, and they know exactly what what they're expecting and what to do if they don't get what they're expecting, because obviously defenses disguise what they're doing all the time. So that's where you hope Cade gets to by the end of his career, and if he gets there, then I do think Clemson will win a lot of football games, because I do think everything else around him is there. I do think this is a talented wide receiver room. I do think that you have a capable stable of running backs, and especially with Phil Mafah coming back.
Oh yeah,
you have a very deep tight end room and a talented tight end room. The offensive line, you have the talent there, and I believe you now have the coaching to match that talent.
Yes.
Of course, we'll have to see that, but there's like we've said, countless times throughout this offseason, there are a lot of reasons to buy into what Clemson has offensively and what Cade could potentially be in 2024. But like we said, got to see it on the field, and the time will tell. But this is a massive season for Cade and for the offense and Garrett Riley and Clemson in general, because you want to be able to reverse the narrative about what the program being on a backslide, and Dabo is, doesn't have this much, doesn't have much time left. And I saw somebody say that, Dabo is one more disappointing season away from being on the hot seat. Like, and it's like obviously these people aren't very well acquainted with Clemson and kind of the goings ons of our athletic department and how things go around here. But you're just, you're going to get those kinds of those kind of comments, and you're going to get those narratives are going to be made, whether they're true or not. So, and it's not a good look. So, Clemson ultimately is going to be the one that has to dispel those narratives. So it's put up or shut up time, I think.
It's 100% put up or shut up time. And I think this year has to be the year. And all the narratives, like you mentioned, Jordan, are out there. The narratives about, Dabo Swinney's going to hang it up, and he's let the game pass himself by, and he's burying his head in the sand, and Dabo's just okay with running a program with a good culture that graduates students and makes good fathers and good men and good husbands, and is about the Paul journey and the opportunities outside of football, and the degrees that his guys are getting, and he's okay with if this is what it's got to be, then that's how he's going to run his program. Like, and okay, I get some of that criticism, and I get that people disagree with maybe some of the ways that Dabo Swinney runs his program and how he goes about things. I know people don't like necessarily how he goes about the transfer portal, or how he goes about how they divvy up NIL, or that he doesn't lean into NIL more, and people think he should. But at the end of the day, I don't think these people are serious when they're basically saying, to me, what they're basically saying is Dabo no longer cares if Clemson's competitive. And I don't think that could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
You can't sit there and tell me that Dabo Swinney is not trying to get this program back to where it was when they were winning titles in 2016 and 2018 with the moves that he's made recently. I understand the criticism of some of Dabo's hires after, some coaches left, right? After Robbie Caldwell retired, and after
Jeff Scott went to
Jeff
USF.
Scott left.
Tony Elliott.
Tony Elliott goes to Virginia, right? I understand the criticism of some of his hires after those guys left, right? He brings in, or he promotes Brandon Streeter, right? He gives Thomas Austin a job, and he had only ever coached, lower level college football, and not for that long, right? So brings in Thomas Austin as the offensive line coach, brings in Brandon Streeter. But guess what? Those were very short experiments. It's not like these dudes were coaching for Dabo for 5 and 6 years, and then he threw up his hands like, all right, I guess I'll make a change because everybody's complaining. He fired Brandon Streeter after one season, a former player of his that coached on his staff for years, lives literally next door to the guy, fired him after year one to bring in Garrett Riley. Thomas Austin, another former player of Dabo Swinney, fired after 2 seasons as the offensive line coach. Brings in Matt Luke. Does that sound like a guy that's not trying to be competitive, that's not trying to win? If all he's trying to do is have a good culture and graduate players, and we're gonna do it our way, and if you don't like it, then kind of buzz off type of mentality, then why would he fire those guys? He could have just kept those guys. If Garrett Riley wasn't calling the offense last year, why do you fire Brandon Streeter? If Dabo wanted to call the offense the entire time, why fire Brandon Streeter and bring in Garrett Riley? You think a guy like Garrett Riley is going to come in fresh off a national title against Texas Christian or at TCU, right? Come in and be like, oh yeah, Dabo, I'll just be your puppet out here. You could call the plays. Come on, man. Like this stuff can't be serious. There's no way people say this stuff and like they actually.
That's my favorite one. It's like Dabo's calling the plays. I'm like, you can't.
I mean, it's the craziest thing. But people like actually believe this stuff, or at least they say it on the internet enough to make me think that they believe it. And it's just like, you don't fire a guy like if Dabo wanted to call the plays, he'd have just kept Brandon Streeter, because Brandon Streeter would have probably done whatever Dabo Swinney wanted him to do, right? Same thing with Thomas Austin. But instead, he brings in these in Garrett Riley, a younger coach, a fresh mind, a guy that has fresh ideas on offense
and no ties to Clemson or
with
Dabo.
no ties to Clemson whatsoever to revamp the Clemson offense. And then he brings in a guy like Matt Luke that has decades of experience, head coaching experience, multiple high first and second round picks in the NFL draft for offensive linemen, a huge pedigree of just producing these massive, good offensive linemen. He brings that guy in. You don't bring people like that in if you're not trying to be competitive. That's all I'm saying. So the narrative that Clemson or that Dabo is just burying his head in the sand and he doesn't want to be competitive in college football anymore, man, get out of here with that. You may disagree, and I may disagree with some of the stuff that he does and how he goes about certain things, but to say that the guy's not trying to be competitive and not trying to bring Clemson back to where they were in 2016 and 2018 and for those, 10 plus years of or 12 consecutive seasons of double-digit wins, come on, that's not true. He is trying to do it. And the changes I think that he's made recently make it very clear that he's trying to do that. So it's just some of those narratives out there that I hear constantly in the media, whether it be on social media or, different people talking, and it drives me crazy, man. It's maddening sometimes. And I'm not saying Dabo's perfect, and I'm not saying his way's gonna, work. We'll see. I think you put it perfectly, Jordan, that this year is, this kind of put up or shut up time this year, right? Like it's the year to see if we can get this thing going back in the right direction.
100%, man. I have no notes. You kind of hit on everything. That was perfect. I think that's a great place to kind of, end it off and sort of and kind of transition to the comment section. Sure, you guys have been chatting back and forth a lot. So let's, well, actually, before we do that, just a quick reminder, if you haven't already, please hit that like button. Seriously, it definitely helps the channel. It's free, really easy way to support. Share the videos, share the live streams. Like we said, we are 6 subscribers away from 5,000. So whatever you got to do, log into to your mom or dad's YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel, do something. I don't know. It won't hurt. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I said 6 away. You guys can do it. I believe in you. You can definitely do it. Hit that like button. Find a way to get us to that 5,000 subscriber mark. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And once again, check the description for all the links to support the channel. Amazon link, the Patreon link is always open. Get access to the Discord, Mark's picks, expert picks from other notable college football media members. It really is worth the price, just $5 a month at the minimum. So I can't recommend it enough. So if you want to support Mark and the Voice of College Football YouTube channel, that's another great way to do that. But let's get into the comment section. As always, we star the comments throughout the show and see what you guys are asking. But if you want to make sure that your question is read, the super chat feature is available, and they are first come, first serve. So feel free to do that if you feel obliged to. All right. John asked this at the beginning of the show. Is it time to freak out about recruiting yet? Ha ha ha. I'm spending too much time on fan sites. Yeah, no, it's not time to freak out. It's never time to freak out in June about recruiting for. I mean, it's kind of funny because Clemson is sitting with a top 5 class right now, so it's like we're kind of we're kind of a lot of fans are ready to jump off the bridge because some of our remaining targets are trending elsewhere. But this is always, recruiting is a marathon, not a sprint. And, Clemson has already done a lot of good work. I really love where the class is right now. So, even if you don't get, the guys that you want, it's going to work out in the end. Clemson is still a very attractive place to play. They have other guys on the board, and this is always it's always the long game. It's not how many guys can you get in the month of June, even though it's really fun to get those string of guys in the month of June, like we have the past couple cycles. But obviously, it's going to be a slower burn this go around. And I think it's partially because you did have an earlier run, earlier in the year that you don't, Clemson hasn't typically had. So I think kind of mentally it's kind of messed with some of the fan base too, because it's like, this time last cycle we did not have like 14 commits. I think we were sitting at, oh man, I think we maybe had 7, 8, something like that. You're muted again.
Sorry, I keep muting myself and then forgetting that I mute myself.
Yeah. But what were you saying?
I was just saying that you're right. It was a much lower number this time last recruiting cycle, which is why that kind of spurt of recruits that we got out of the official visit weekend was such a huge deal for us. But again, remember, this time last season we were also missing on every offensive lineman outside of Ronan O'Connell that we went after as well. So, it's never over. We ended up putting together a pretty adequate, I would say, recruiting class along the offensive line. And this time last year, it was not looking promising. But we closed it out well, and it ended up being, pretty good.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jay said, I was surprised to see Cade at the Elite 11. Well, I mean, he is, like I said, he's an Elite 11 alum. He was the MVP in his class. So, it's only natural to bring him back. I think they try to do that every year. They try to get, somebody who won it there. And, Cade looked really good in the drills. I mean, I saw some clips. I didn't see like his whole workout, but he looked like, he looked like the 5-star quarterback that he looked like when he was there last. So, you definitely rather see that than him stink up the joint and look worse than the high school kids.
Yeah, that would, man. Oh man. Yeah. No, good thing that didn't happen. That would have been rough. Yeah. We'd have been on here having a different conversation today.
Yes, we would have. John asked, do those showcases pay money? Maybe some elite quarterbacks aren't interested without enough jack. I'm not actually sure. I think they do. I'm not actually sure about that with how the rules are now. I don't think they did that before. I think it's just they invite you.
Definitely not before, and I wouldn't think they would.
Are you talking about the college? Like, do they pay the college counselors, or are you asking do they pay the high school kids? Because I know they don't. No, they don't.
They don't pay the high school kids because it's considered prestigious to get invited to that. So
yeah,
that's the compensation is you got an invite.
Yeah,
I guess, but no, I don't think they compensate the the college counselors in some way, whether that be just per diem or, travel and, maybe they pay for travel expenses and, some per diem to get food and that kind of stuff. But I wouldn't assume that it would be very much.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. I've never thought about that. I don't know. Yeah. Because I don't think they probably didn't pay them before. I definitely don't think they paid them before.
Couldn't pay them before.
Yeah.
Probably the only thing they could get away with before is like travel expenses and then maybe a stipend for food and stuff like that. But maybe now with, NIL being a thing and, you can pay college players, maybe they get a little bit more now.
Who knows? Joe Long, he says, question from a domer. Did you guys like Bo Collins? Obviously asking on the behalf of Notre Dame. yes, I did like Bo Collins a lot when he was here. I think what kind of his big thing was, consistency wasn't always there. It just, I think as a freshman, he stepped up really big at a time where Clemson needed a receiver to step up with all the injuries that had happened. 2022, I think Bo Collins at his best. If you want to see Bo Collins at his best at Clemson, go watch like the first 4, 5, 6 games of Clemson's season in 2022. He was poised to have a big year.
Yeah.
And then he got hurt, and I don't think he ever really found that version of himself again.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the sad part, because he really did start off his sophomore year on a tear, but injuries just kind of sidelined him for a lot of the back half of that season. And this past year, he struggled. He got open. He had a couple of nice games, but struggled with drops at times. He never found that confidence that he was playing with. Again, after his sophomore year. So I do think that if he does find that version of himself at Notre Dame, he's going to be a really massive weapon for them. So I do like Bo a lot. And I think Notre Dame, if they can get the most out of him, they got themselves a really, really good one. So excited to see what he does, especially since Notre Dame, it feels like for the first time in forever, isn't on Clemson's schedule.
Yeah.
So
schedule.
Yeah.
We don't got to worry about a rematch with Bo Collins, but
yeah,
I think they got a really good receiver. You mentioned him not really being the same, as he was prior to that injury his sophomore season. And I think part of that was, a lot of guys struggle coming out of injury, right? They struggle with confidence in the whatever injured part they had, whether it be a knee, an ankle, a shoulder, whatever, right? They struggle with confidence with that particular body part that was injured and that is now, most likely surgically repaired. And then they struggle with, the thought of re-injury, right? That's always in the back of your mind. Once you have, these major injuries, it's hard not to think about getting another major injury, right? So I think that plays into it. And you mentioned some of the struggles that he had at Clemson with just inconsistency and drops at times, but then you meant other times he would have these flashes of just greatness, and you're like, that's the guy right there. That's the guy we need him to be all the time. And he could just never consistently be that guy for Clemson, it seemed like. But I think for Bo Collins, it was important this offseason to get a change of scenery, right? And maybe that sparks more consistency, because when he's on and when he's playing up to his ability, hey, that dude's the real deal. He's a really good receiver, and I think he could be a good one for you guys, Joe. It's just, is he going to be that consistent guy week in and week out? Because he's going to give you flashes of it, no doubt about it. It's just, will he consistently be that guy through the duration of a season? And if he can put that together, it'll probably be a special piece for you.
Absolutely. He really is talented. I mean,
he is.
He came in as a freshman, really beyond his years from a route running standpoint, especially when, Clemson could kind of play him anywhere. I think one of his biggest problems was, later in his career. I mean, Clemson needed him to be that boundary receiver. And I just, where you're on the ball, especially when you're on the ball, and you're going to be facing press coverage at times. I thought he did his best work when, he could line up off the ball, and he didn't necessarily, he could work with some space. I thought he was at his best. So I think Notre Dame, I guess we'll see with what Mike Denbrock, the new offensive coordinator, kind of does, and kind of how he thinks Bo fits in his system. But if they can give him, put him in those right positions, I think he'll be a very, very good piece for Notre Dame. But yeah, best of luck to Bo. I mean, represented himself really well at Clemson.
Yeah,
great, great dude. So
No hate coming from this side of the fan base on Bo. I wish him the best.
Absolutely. Jay says the offense did look different, so sometimes I don't understand those things. And in reference to, the people saying Dabo was meddling with the offense or calling plays or whatever. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that people just, and even our own people within the fan base were guilty of it. They'll see a screen pass and be like, "Oh man, it's the same offense as last year." And it's like,
I'm mainly talking about Clemson fans when when I went on my little rant. I'm mainly talking to Clemson fans because it's crazy.
Yeah, the offense, and even some people with outside the fan base that tried to say, Clemson was schematically, they didn't look different. Yes, they did. I think because there's a lot of crossover. I mean, it's an air raid offense, but with a lot of spread. But it's a lot of spread concepts that Clemson already ran to some degree. So they'll see a similar formation or a play call, and they'll think, "Oh man, that's the same offense." But no, it wasn't. And I think you could see the kind of the difference, the variation. I think the biggest thing was the variation in formations was kind of the biggest change. But I think when you got to the back half of the season and you had lost a couple of games and they sort of simplified things, I think some people just kind of got it in their head that Clemson was still the same. They were running the same stuff that they did.
Look, at that point, they were doing whatever they could to just put together wins. At that point, it didn't matter.
Go watch that Duke game. They showed Duke a lot of looks. They just didn't run them very well. That was kind of
we didn't execute.
Didn't always execute them well. But they still moved the ball. I mean, they had 200 yards passing, 200 yards rushing, but couldn't punch it in the end zone for the reasons that we all
catastrophic turnovers. And that carried itself throughout the entire season. That was if you could put a theme on the 2023 season, it was catastrophic turnovers at the worst times possible. But no, we didn't bring Garrett Riley in to run the same offense. We didn't pay him. What is he, the highest paid, or at least one of the highest paid coordinators in the country? We don't pay him that much money to not run his offense. I can guarantee you that.
Absolutely.
I don't think I got to be a Clemson insider to figure that out. I think it's common sense.
Come on, let's use our brain here. Like there's no point in firing a guy firing a guy that's loyal to you and will do whatever you ask him to hire a guy that you have no relationship with, just to make him do the same thing the other guy was doing.
To run the same offense of the guy you just fired. Come on now.
And like somebody will say, well, no, Dab only did that to make it appear like he's making a change. But I was like, no, Brandon Streeter was there for one season. Like there was nobody within the Clemson fan base reasonably thought that Brandon Streeter was only going to get one season to coach. It's like, okay, well, that the first season, it was an improvement from 2021, but it still wasn't good enough. We'll see what he can do in 2020. Like that was my mentality before Brandon Streeter was fired. Like when Larry Williams dropped that bombshell, that I think it was like a Thursday. It was a Thursday afternoon,
right before our show.
Right before our show.
Yeah, it was right before our show.
I couldn't believe what I was reading. I clicked on his profile to make sure this was the real Larry Williams. I was like, yeah, Brandon Streeter fired.
I remember I think I was chilling on my couch at that time. I was watching a show or doing something, and you text me, and I was like, no way. Like, no one can tell me they saw that coming. There's no way. Like, I didn't see Brandon Streeter getting fired. There was no way I saw him getting fired. Year one, and statistically, the offense did improve. Yeah. So he could hang his hat
by a lot.
Although it wasn't good enough, and everyone could clearly see it wasn't good enough, it was still statistically much better than the previous season.
By a lot.
By a whole lot.
Clemson's 2020-21 offense, I believe, was 106th in the country. it's I still don't know how that team won 10 games. Like I think that's like we're gonna look back in like like 10 years and be like, how did that team win 10 games? I mean, we know how good that defense was, but just that feat was incredible with how awful that offense was a lot of that season. And then so you jump you go from 106 and then to after 2022, I think they were 40 something. They were like maybe I think they were like 48th or something in the country in offense. Like that is a massive jump. Like there was improvement across the board from passing, even with the struggles that DJ had late in the year. He had a much better season that year. Obviously, you had Will Shipley, ran for over 1,000 yards. Really productive season. Like you got, Antonio Williams had a strong freshman campaign. You got some production from some other guys. Like that offense wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a massive improvement. So you were thinking going into 2023 that, okay, well, season didn't end that great. Orange Bowl was kind of a disaster, but Cade Klubnik, in another, we'll give him another year with Brandon Streeter. We'll see kind of what kind of improvements they make. The receivers should be better. Offensive line, we'll see what happens. But no, I mean, Dabo pulled the trigger. So it really was a shocking, sort of move. Like nobody that's something we've never seen him be that cutthroat. So it doesn't make sense to when you give it any bit of thought to be like, no, Dabo hired Garrett Riley to run the same offense that they were already running. Like that just doesn't make sense.
No way.
John asks, how hot do you think Grisham's seat might be? Dabo has proven he'll correct the wrong. Seems like even his wide receiver expectations are very high this year. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to describe it as a hot seat because, but this is a very big year for Tyler Grisham. Let's just put it bluntly. Like, I do think Tyler Grisham has gotten unfair criticism in the past. From the fan base, from myself, so I'm not even removing myself from that. Like I was critical of Tyler Grisham, but when you look at it, Clemson's best receivers over the past couple of years have been the guys he recruited. So he had the task of kind of having to sort of reset the wide receiver room because you had a couple of classes that just did not pan out. And, that's a massive hole in your sort of natural recruiting plan. But I think he did a good job at identifying. I mean, obviously this past cycle, landing Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore was a massive deal. Like that's partially to his credit, especially with TJ Moore. But, you go back to the past couple of cycles. Antonio Williams ended up being your best receiver in 2022. Tyler Brown ended up being arguably your best receiver in 2023 when he was healthy. Like he's finding the right guys. Like the evaluation I think has improved. So and we can talk about Adam Randall and kind of his struggle, but that's not really. I don't think that's Tyler Grisham's fault. I mean, what do? The guy tears his ACL and's out his freshman year, and he was kind of up and down this past season. So what? What do we see from him in 2023, and whether we won't really see the fruits of that until we actually get on the field. I said 2023, I meant 2024. So this is a massive year for Tyler Grisham, but I don't think it's as dire as maybe some fans would think, because I do think that the progression there has been better than some of the other positions that obviously there wasn't a satisfactory job being done. Obviously the offensive line just flat out wasn't good enough last year at times, and then we've seen even with defensive end, we've seen kind of hasn't been bad, but it's definitely been a significant step down over the years than what we had grown accustomed to. I think the biggest example is probably Miles Murphy. Like he was a very good player for Clemson for 3 years, but he never. I don't think he ever really found that next gear. Now we'll see what he does in the league. He didn't have a very productive rookie season, and I didn't expect him to because he wasn't really as ready as maybe you thought he would be when he signed with Clemson out of high school. Like I thought when Clemson got him, he was like, I thought he was, oh man, this is going to be the next great, superstar stud defensive end. And he had a really strong freshman year and pretty good sophomore year. But then like it never got to that next level. And I think you kind of saw kind of the questions about, are we getting the most out of the guys in our defensive end room and all of that? And are we recruiting at the same level? Because that certainly took a step back as well.
Yep.
So, like, I don't think that's been as big of a problem with Grisham.
Right.
So, and I think obviously this past cycle helped him a ton. So,
right.
It's hard to gauge how much how hot his seat is. But honestly, I think it would take, if the wide receivers aren't good this year, we're going to have some questions.
Yeah, if it looks like it did last year, there might be a change this offseason.
Yeah,
I'm not going to lie, because Dabo has made it very clear within the staff, both by his words that have been told to us by media members, and by his actions, that if you're not doing your job and he feels that the program is not going in the right direction in your particular position group, you're gone.
Yeah.
We've been told multiple reports by different media outlets that he said that in the past 2 seasons, and changes have been made every single season that he has said that. So the one thing that I think you mentioned, Jordan, that makes a lot of sense to me is I think recruiting is still allowing Tyler Grisham maybe a longer leash, right? Because he is pulling in the – I mean, this past recruiting class alone, when you think of Brian West going to TJ Moore, right? When you're bringing in guys like that, your leash is going to be a little bit longer. Now, with that said, the production has to now translate to the field, right? You're bringing in the guys, the big-time names. Now we got to see it on the field, right? And it can't just be one guy popping and then everybody looks like a bunch of average Joes out there, right? Like it was when Antonio Williams popped, right? And to some maybe a little bit lesser degree when Tyler Brown popped, right? So production's definitely got to improve on the field, but I think Tyler Grisham knows that, and he's not the only one that's going to be involved in that happening. We kind of hit on all of those pieces that will go into determining, how improved this offense is. But the wide receivers are definitely a big key. And I think Tyler Grisham knows that, he's been hired to do a job, and it's going to be expected at a certain level. And if he doesn't perform up to that level, then make no mistake, Dabo will move on. He will go find someone else to coach the wide receiver core. And I have zero.
It's the wide receivers, man. Like that's Dabo's baby. Like
that's his thing.
I just know like how crushing like these past few seasons have been for Dabo to watch from especially like 2021. Yeah, that was hell on earth with injuries and just nobody really. I mean, your best receiver was a 50% Justin Ross that didn't have nearly the same type of go that he once had, and then 2022 and I know like this how much like how difficult it's probably been for him to watch how this room has kind of fallen off over the since 2020 and kind of the direction it was in.
Yeah, I know he's definitely not happy with it.
Yeah, so you know he's if they're not good this year, yeah, there's going to be some there's going to be some tough conversations for sure.
Yeah, guaranteed. But hopefully we don't have to have that conversation at year's end, because if we do, Jordan, that means me and you had a long season of, not so great live post game shows.
Yeah.
And I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that 4 more times this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay asks, this is a good question. What defines a successful Clemson season, I'm assuming, for you guys personally, and what about for the outside media? Yeah, I think a successful season is, I think, getting back to double-digit wins.
Yep.
And being squarely in the playoff.
10-2, roughly 10-2. Back in the ACC championship game, and then obviously a playoff berth. I think a 12-team playoff. I think a program like Clemson, you should expect to make the 12-team playoff. I mean, looking at the roster, looking at the talent that is, within that program, I mean, I think 10-2 and a playoff berth. I think that's kind of, that would spell a successful season to me, and that would say, we are now trending back towards the right direction, right? We may not be there yet. I'm not saying we're going out there and, going 12-0 and winning a national title and, all this stuff, but we definitely, I think, have to get back to double-digit wins and get a seat at that playoff table again, albeit a 12-team playoff.
And I think the biggest thing, even beyond the record, is how do you look in those how does your play on the field reflect that record? Because
that's true. We've won double-digit games in seasons past and looked pretty terrible doing it.
So
that's a good point.
Really it revolves around the offense. I mean, does it look more like a explosive, multifaceted offense? Is the pass game, something that players are, that opposing teams are going to have to respect? Are you going to be able to block, the majority of fronts you face? Are you going to be able to, hit explosive, play? Are you going to be able to run the football? So that's kind of even beyond the record, if you're, 10-2, but you really just kind of relied on your defense and you got bailed out, you played a bunch of close games and you lost, probably the 2 biggest games on your schedule, especially if you lose to Georgia, is what it is. But if you lose to Florida State or NC State, maybe you feel a little bit different. So, it all depends on what that 10-2 looks like from an offensive standpoint specifically, because that's the side of the football that ultimately is going to determine whether this team is a playoff team or we're going to be another 8-4 team. That's just
absolutely. It's got to look vastly different on the offensive side of the ball this year. It just does. We can't keep, spiraling down this offensive black hole that we've been in for what feels like 10 years, but really it's only been 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And we got one more question from Jay. He asks, who do you think is the best route runner on the team? That's a good question. I'm going to say Antonio Williams. When Antonio Williams is healthy, I think he is just. I think his feel is kind of next to nobody else. I think on the team, his quick change of direction and his there's just not a lot of wasted movement when you watch him run his routes. He's very, very deliberate with, every single cut he makes. I think he's just he was very well coached from a very young age and into high school. I mean, we know what he was at Dutch Fork. So,
Right.
but I think it's Antonio Williams. But Bryant Wesco, I think, was a very good route runner in high school. Would not surprise me if he ended up taking that title. We'll see what I think TJ Moore was a really good route runner. But I'm going to say Antonio Williams. I think he displays a lot of veteran quality, like NFL, type, route running. He's just not the most physically gifted. So it's like he's not going to. I mean, he's got good speed, but he's not an elite burner. So, like that's kind of that's really his only drawback. But he's very, very, very good at understanding leverage, and he runs his routes with a purpose, and that's kind of where we need to get some of the other guys on this team, up to that level. So yeah, I'm going to there.
I would agree. First guy that came to mind for me was Antonio Williams. I think we sometimes forget how good Antonio Williams was because he spent all of last season hurt, and it seems like his breakout year was forever ago. Just because of him just not being on the field last year, and when we did see him on the field most recently, it didn't really look like Antonio Williams, right? You could tell that he was still limited. He obviously wanted to be out there, but he was still limited. But definitely think that he's probably got the most crisp routes on the team as of right now. But close second, probably Tyler Brown, maybe a Troy Stellato. He's a pretty good route runner as well. Gets open a lot. Definitely a guy that can create some space. So I'd throw him in that mix as well of guys that can potentially be, really elite kind of route runner guys. So, but yeah, I would agree with you. And Antonio Williams would definitely be my number one right now.
All right. Let's go with one more before we close it out. Well, I do actually. Two more. Let's say two more because I do want to address this one. John says, "Why do you think so many Clemson fans care what ESPN's Howard Stern without hair says about Dabo or the team?" Paul. Yeah, it's hard to take Feinbaum seriously these days, but yeah, that just he's been such a fixture of especially the last 10 years in Clemson's run and rise to prominence and the whole, like, he's just been a constant, sort of detractor. So he's just one of those guys that sticks out, and he's one of the bigger names. I mean, he was one of the bigger names. And so he's just a figurehead for everything that, he's the figurehead for everything about the media and, the assumed like dislike of Clemson, especially from an ESPN standpoint and all of that. It's like, that's something that's always been ingrained in Clemson fans culture is that, the ESPN doesn't like us. They don't want us to win. And Paul is kind of the embodiment of that. So whenever he says something, it elicits a different reaction.
Yeah, and I think it runs deep, kind of with a guy like Paul Feinbaum because of how, I guess, it's the best way to put this, hypercritical he was of Clemson's programs, even when they were, at their highest of heights. When they were on the run in 2016 and through, in 2018 when they won the national titles, he was still super critical of Clemson and Dabo and, the program and all that. So I think there's just a deep seated disdain for a guy like Paul Feinbaum. And I don't know that people really care what he says, but unfortunately, to your point, Jordan, he's kind of one of those main figureheads, at least at ESPN, right? Like, if he says something, it's going to be blasted out all over the place, right? And then especially if he says something about Dabo Swinney or, some big coach in college football that gets talked about a lot. And regardless of whether you listen to him or not, you're going to hear something that he says about Clemson. And it pisses you off. Yeah, it just pisses you off. So he's very good at getting a rise out of Clemson fans. It's got to be, on purpose at this point. But everybody know Paul Finebaum. He's an SEC guy. If you're not in the SEC, he doesn't really care or have very much respect for you. I mean, that's just his that's his personal opinion, and so be it.
Absolutely. Alex, yes, which wide receivers could be deep threats this year? We spent a lot of time talking about the wide receivers, so why not just close it out on the wide receivers?
Let's do it.
I think the great thing about how this room is shaking out is there are a lot of different guys that I think could potentially be deep threats. We know how good the two true freshmen are coming in Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. I definitely think that they have some downfield playability. But even just the guys on the team, we saw Tyler Brown. He was the receiver on a lot of Clemson's explosive passing plays last year. He's very good at getting open down the field. Adam Randall, I think he's the one they really want to be that guy on the boundary. And we know, I watched him in high school. I know how talented he is. And we talked about, kind of him finding, the confidence that he had and being able to translate, what he's able to do in practice to doing it on the field. Because it just, and Dabo has talked about it, but he was fantastic in the spring by all accounts. And he's poised to have a really big year. And he definitely has like a guy with his combination of size and speed is pretty rare. And so he's just very, very gifted physically. So it really is just about treating every rep the same and having that motor continue to go through a 4-quarter game. Because I think that was kind of his issue a lot of times last year. You would see him do something really incredible, like just get down the field in an instant, and he's really, really aggressive on the football. And then sometimes it's like he doesn't even feel like he has a shot even before the play starts, and it's just kind of going through the motions. So it's like getting him to have that motor every single rep for him. But I definitely think he has, great downfield play potential. Another guy that we just don't talk about enough, because he's another guy that spent a lot of time injured last year, is Cole Turner.
Turner, man. That's a burner, dude.
I think we've forgotten about Cole Turner, and we haven't discussed him a ton, but man, he's a really, really great athlete. Like, fastest player on the team. Like, he is legit. Like, it's like the jokes are like write themselves about, oh, he's the small white receiver that like, but he is and he's not even really that small, but that's just kind of the stereotype. But he really is a plus athlete. And you saw him at the end of 2020, like him come on at the end of 2022. Like, I mean, obviously his game against North Carolina was big, but I think people forget about that catch he made against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl. It was early in that game. Like, that was like he's not only is he fast, but he's got hops. Like, he can jump.
Right.
I think Cole Turner is a guy they're going to want to get on the field and get him some opportunities to make some plays downfield, because his speed really is a weapon. So I think Cole Turner is one of those guys that is one of the most intriguing as far as like where he fits into the overall plan for the offense, because he really, could be a guy that just kind of, breaks onto the scene this year. Yeah. So I really want to see, how they work him in, and then how they kind of split that up. And but again, that's why I really like the makeup of this wide receiver room, and why I'm so high on it, because you have the depth that you didn't have in previous seasons, and you just have a lot of different.
And the diversity of skill set and body type within this wide receiver room, and we don't even mention a Jake Brenningstool.
Yeah,
I mean, this dude is long and athletic as they come. And
yeah, he's basically another wide. He can basically be
another wide receiver. Yeah, that lines up at tight end. I mean, you talk about a guy that could really stretch the middle of the field and make defenses very uncomfortable. That's a guy like Jake Brenningstool, man. And if you use that guy properly, and some of these wide receivers come on and hit like we expect them to do, man, like this wide receiver core could spell like a lot of difficult problems for defenses in 2024. There's definitely it just looks way different than it has in years past, right? Like just from, you mentioned, Jordan, the depth standpoint, but just like the different body types that we have there, the different skill sets that are in that room. Whereas, 2-3 years ago, all our wide receivers were kind of starting to look the same. And there was no real, difference in any of them. They were all just kind of the same wide receiver with different numbers and names. But that's not the case anymore. And it's going to be special, man. This group could be really good if they put it together and become consistent and
stay healthy.
Knock on wood, injuries.
Yeah.
Injuries has been literally the Achilles heel to this particular group since 2021.
Yep.
We haven't had a healthy year of wide receivers since 2020.
Yep. And even then, that was the year that Justin Ross didn't play at all.
Right.
So it was
so was it really healthy? So what, 2019 was the last season that we truly had a full stable of healthy wide receivers? That's a long time, man.
Yeah.
That's a long time to have that much bad luck in the same position group year in and year out. That's a tough break. So hopefully that the luck turns around for us this year. Those guys stay healthy, because I think if majority of them stay healthy, it has the potential to be a really good season for that position group.
Yeah. And Jay makes a great point. He's not the only one in that tight end room that could be a quality receiver either. Yeah, I mean, you saw the plays that Josh Sapp made in that spring game as well. He's poised to have a big year. So it's like.
Oh, and you got Christian Bentaker on campus now.
And you have Christian Bentaker coming in as a summer.
He just showed up, by the way.
Yeah, like I think you got arguably the best tight end in the class coming in. So it's like we keep talking about how much how the pieces around Cade are the diversity of skill sets and what they bring to the table, and you're just like, man, there's no reason why this offense shouldn't be good. And so I mean, to a degree, you're right, man. It's like, so, and that's why we're so it sucks, because that the last few years have happened, because it's like, even you can't get too excited.
No. You're like, you want to be excited, but you're like, man, I've seen the past 3 years.
Yeah,
I can't get excited. So the best we can muster up. I know I've said it on previous shows, but the best we can muster up is just being cautiously optimistic about the ability for this offense to turn it around this year.
Right.
I 1,000% believe that the personnel are already on the roster.
Yeah.
To make this offense closer to what it used to be. I believe we got the right offensive coordinator. I believe that we got the right offensive line coach now, right? So I believe the pieces are starting to be put in place. Now we got to see it on the field. And I think Garrett Riley can work with this group of guys. That remains to be seen. Again, never getting too high just because we've seen the product that has been displayed on the field for 3 seasons now, and it's just frankly not good. It's not good at all. So you can't get too high. You can't get too excited about it. But it's, to your point, Jordan, it's kind of hard when you just start listing name after name, and you know what these guys are capable of because you've watched their film and you've seen their recruitment and the what scouts have written about them, and their high school tape, and some of them what they've already done at Clemson in spurts, outside of injuries and stuff. So it's hard not to be excited, but again, staying cautiously optimistic because I don't want to be duped again, man. It's getting too much.
Yeah, it's getting too much for sure. It's like if you took this team and removed, like in a vacuum, and removed any of the previous year's context and just looked at the team you have, like you'd be talking, oh man, we're gonna be. I think we're gonna be pretty damn good this year. Like playoffs, potentially national championship. Like we would be like, say even like if last year, even if you had last year and you just you went like, instead of going 8-4, you went 10-2, and
Right.
you won the game, especially if you won those swing games that you frankly
overtime game
beat yourselves in. Yeah. Like we're talking about this team a lot differently. Like we're thinking, oh man, it's like this is a surefire playoff team. Like, man, I'm so excited to see what, and that's one of the toughest things because it's like, again, like what you see on what we've seen on the roster has not translated to the results on the field, and so and that's kind of the disappointing thing about how last season went and how just so many things did not happen the way that they probably should have and could have, and having to go into this offseason with a lot of reasons to be excited, but yet having to rein it back. But yeah, not to end it on a somber note, because we really do have a lot of high expectations for what this offense can be. But there is that nagging feeling in the back of your mind that, man, this could go wrong again, and we could be 8-4.
Yeah.
Maybe, God forbid, even worse.
Could be worse. Yeah.
So it just that's the reality. That's the painful reality of Clemson fans right now.
Hey, man. That's college football. That's why we love it. You never know what's going to happen from week to week. You never know what's going to happen from year to year. Nothing is a guarantee. So it's fun to talk about these guys. It's fun to talk about, their potential and what it could look like on the field this year. But, as we all know, we really won't know until, that ball's kicked off on, August 31st against the Georgia Bulldogs. And we get that first big measuring stick and figure out what this iteration of the Tigers are all about, and, how hungry they are, and, how much they're up to the task, because, we're going to find out early. And that Georgia team's going to bring it for sure. So
we're definitely going to learn a lot. I mean, it's not going to write the story of the season, but we're going to learn a lot.
No. That week. Win, lose, or draw. That won't write the season, obviously, but it'll definitely, I think, let us know where we are. So we'll see.
I think that's a great way to kind of end us off. I've kind of done the outro the past couple of weeks, but this is your thing, so I'm a flip it back to you this go around.
All right, man. Well, first and foremost, we appreciate every single person in the comment section right now. Thank you guys so much for showing up. You guys do this every single week for us. Sorry for the changes, but I think we're going to stick with this time spot going forward. I think it works best for all of us. So remember, new time slot, 5:30 on Friday. Close out the week with Jordan Bowman and Tiger Paul Craven talking about our Clemson Tigers. That's how we're going to end every single week from now until we say otherwise. So thanks everybody for stopping by, getting into the comment section. You guys always have amazing comments. Appreciate you guys always supporting the show in that way. I think sometimes we forget to thank you guys enough by just showing up, hitting that like button, and getting in that comment section, because without you guys being in the comment section, the show wouldn't be nearly as good as it is when you guys are in here interacting with us and bringing up topics and asking us questions. So thank you so much for that. Remember to support all the channels out here on the Voice of College Football. Bunch of different team channels out there, a bunch of different conference channels out there. So go check them out. We are close to 5,000 subscribers. I think we are still 6 away. Are we still 6 away? Am I still right about that? Probably. We're probably still 6 away. So help us out with that.
I can only see the exact number on YouTube Studio. That's what sucks. It's like they don't. I hate that YouTube got rid of that.
Okay, we're 5 away now.
Oh, okay.
We are now 5 away. Everybody,
let's go.
4,995. Okay, so 5 away. Get us there before next show. We would really appreciate that. Make sure if you haven't already, hit that like button on your way out. And I think that'll do us for tonight. You
know what? What's really cool is like it kind of coincides. If we get to 5,000, it'll also coincide with All In Show 75, and of course Clemson Tigers Live 100. So that'll be a fun little coalescing of milestones there.
Check that out, man. That's going to be pretty special, man. So get us there before the 75th iteration of the All In Show and the 100th iteration of a Clemson Tiger Live video. So help us get there. We'll see you guys next Friday, 5:30 p.m. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.